Okay, so we're about at time here. Dana's queued up for the next piece. Is he here?
So, yeah, Dana is here. I'm going to, we have a recording just because he wasn't sure of what his internet quality would be like. So I will play Dana's recording here. Last time I checked, he was on the Zoom, so he can say hi, but he should be available for questions after, but we also have staff members online and in the room that can also help. So just give me a second to get that going.
Yeah, I should be here. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Dana.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm in Portugal.
We're trying for you. Okay.
Hi, I am Dana Robinson. I am the Director of Engineering at the HDF Group, and I will be talking about the state of HDF. Unfortunately, I have to pre-record this because I am, as you probably have seen, not in Chicago right now. I am in Portugal, and so I'm sorry about that. I really enjoy meeting everyone. I'm sad that I couldn't make it this year. But let's get into it. We're going to go over some of the HDF product status. We'll go over some of the things we're trying to do on the community engagement front, and we'll talk about some of our future plans. So, product status. We'll start with HDF5. So, I've extended the schedules out to 2025 so you can see what's coming up for the next year. The latest release is 1.14.4 that was released in April of this year. The most important feature, I think, is the Float 16 support, which we've added to better support the machine learning community. We do have plans to add other machine learning formats like there's Float 8 and Float 4, and then Float 16. I think that's a Google Brain format. So we'll look into adding that in, but Float 16 I think was the most important one to get in there. We've added into that some cloud optimized HDF5 tweaks, such as relaxing the page buffer checks when you enable that feature and then try to read a file. And then we've enabled using temporary security credentials. And for the relaxed page buffer checks, that's a useful feature for everybody, not just cloud optimized HDF5. So now it used to be that you had to very carefully match what you set the page buffer settings to when you open a file to the page size of the file, and that is no longer the case. We try to do the right thing. If we can't, we just give up and you get no page buffer. So it makes it a much more tolerant feature to use, and so I highly encourage people to try that out and see if page buffering and page aggregation help you in terms of your performance. So and then another thing that we fixed that's important is there was a bug in the library where chunk offsets returned from API calls. Some of them did not take the user block into account. The user block is an optional feature. It's when you add an arbitrary chunk of data to the front of an HDF5 file. It's uncommonly used. But when it is used, some of these functions would not take it into account. And so if you're using the access pattern where you try to get the locations of the chunks and then parallelize access to the file by just diving in and extracting the chunks manually, that wouldn't work with the user block, and now it does. So we've also improved data type conversion performance. That was done as a part of cleaning up for Float 16 support. You may see performance gains there. It depends on what kind of data type conversions you're doing, whether they're in hardware or software. Your mileage may vary, but it's worth checking out. We've also added in many CVE fixes. There's 35 of them that are new. These are official MITRE CVE fixes, or CVE issues. These were brought in by the community, and we have a list of them here. And as a reminder, we have a CVE repository. So if you're curious to see what the status of any of these things is, you can go look at it. We have a list of everything that's in MITRE. We're going to expand it to OSS Fuzz and other known crashers from GitHub and from our old legacy Jira issues. But we have this test script in there. You can run the test script. You just have to point it at a directory that has H5 dump and ls, etc. in it, and it will try to parse all these files and let you know if that crashes or not. And so we run this as a part of our CI. You can see down there the CVE dev GitHub action, and we run this as part of our every time we do a pull request. So to make sure that we don't regress. So let's see. So The other things that we've added to this, we've added subfiling the subfiling VFD now uses vector IO. The MPIO VFD uses selection IO. These are features where you can pass in groups of things, and a smart VFD can hopefully optimize the IO by doing aggregation or creating a complex MPI data type or whatnot. And there's many other minor tweaks and bug fixes. You'll notice on here, so the 1.14.4 had 2 releases. There's one here in April, and then there's one in May. The one in May was a patch release. There was an ID data type leak when converting compound data types. It was noticed in H5 so make sure you're using the latest patch release of that. And then since it's been a little while since we've had an HDF5 user group, we should talk about the N-1 release, which is 1.14.3. In that one, we improved cross-compiling support, so you no longer have to run H5 detect or H5 make libinfo to cross-compile. And we made many other changes to where you don't have to run any programs at all, so cross-compiling should just work in many cases. Fortran still has to run some programs because we have to detect the kinds and some other stuff, and we'll see if we can make that not have to run programs. But yeah, so cross-compiling is dramatically improved now. We also had some other cloud optimized HDF5 tweaks in there. The most important one is now there's a 16 megabit cache in the read-only S3 VFD. This is like the world's laziest cache. It just grabs the first 16 megabits of the file and try to open it, and that saves us from touching files in the cloud as we're trying to set up HDF5 and peek around in the file to look at superblock stuff and things like that. So, but that helps quite a bit with performance when opening a file. So then we also included in there better support for Intel's One API, AMD's AOCC, NVIDIA's NVHPC. We're trying to stay on top of modern compilers and make sure that everything works well. These would work in the past, I think, because they were often detected as Clang, because the scripts that would look for them would pick up like the LLVM signature in there. But now we have official support for it, and we run most of that stuff in CI. We also added async Fortran API calls. Those are just in wrappers over the C calls, so it's not actually new C functionality. And then, again, parallel HDF5 tweaks and improvements. So coming up, right, if you look over here, we've got 1.14.5 release in September. That will possibly be the last release of 1.14. I'll explain why in a minute. We also have a bunch of OSS fuzz fixes in there. Some cloud optimized HDF5 tweaks will support S3 object URLs, AWS environment variables, and we've added some page buffer options to tools to better support that when you're looking at a cloud file. We also will have zlibng support. That's zlibng is I guess the fancy new, the more cutting edge version of zlib. So if compression is a bottleneck and you're using zlib, that might help you out. And then 1.14.6, which is penciled in for late April, that may not happen depending on the timing of 1.16.0, which I'll talk about in a minute. If it happens, it'll probably just be a bug fix release without any new options. For 1.16.0, so why isn't that 2.0? Well, so when we're working on a feature that's coming out soon where we're going to have complex numbers be a real data type, that required us to bump an internal version number. And even though you won't really see it, you'll see the behavior. And so you wouldn't be able to sanely open a complex number data type file, like a file that had a complex number data set in it, if you were using like 1.14.2. So we decided to do kind of a small major release that would be 1.16.0. Where we would include the complex number support and potentially some changes to library defaults, things like cache sizes and stuff like that, because it's no longer 1997. We want to make sure that we're working well. We're picking defaults that make sense in 2024 and 2025. And then, there's some other small API changes that do require a major version number bump. Like we are switching from using oft in the public API to HD oft, because oft is only 32 bits on Windows, and so that makes using external storage a problem if you've got big data sets. So, but the intent of this is for this to not be a release that causes people a lot of pain as they migrate from 1.14. We intend for it to be an easy migration. I want the migration to be very short and not really require a lot of code changes. And once we release 1.16.0, we will not have a lot of overlap with 114. So, it may be that this 116 release happens over here, and then we would do a 114.6 bug release, but that would be it. That would be the end of it. I do not want to go back to the left side of this figure here where we were supporting 1.8, 110, 112, and 114, and that was madness. So no more of that. When? So the official calendar says April, and I'm kind of hoping to under-promise and over-deliver. I'm hoping it's earlier, mid-November, sometime in January. It depends on how quickly we can come up with a good set of defaults to pick on that, and also just how many OSS fuzz issues are fixed. We'll figure it out. We'll know more a little bit later in the second half of the year. So HDF4. So I know nobody is really super interested in this, but I talk about it a little bit anyway for two reasons. The most important one is to point out there's a lot of new fancy file formats out there, and we're the company that supports our file formats for a long time. So if you care about keeping your data around for a very, very, very long time, then we're the company that does that. I mean, HDF4 files were being written when I was in high school, so we still support it. You can still build a library with a modern compiler and use it. So my overall strategy for this is to maintain the code, continue to release as long as we're able to, as long as there's still funding available to support that. But I want to make sure that it doesn't cost us a lot of time to support it, right? So I want to fix a few longstanding issues that I'll talk about a little bit later, and just minimize long-term cost, right? So let's look at the release schedule. So the latest release is 4.3.0. In that one, we defined the public API a long time ago, long before there was a version control history. Somebody decided that they were going to release all the header files, including the internal ones, and so there was no actual API. So that has changed. We no longer release internal headers, and nobody yelled at me too much. So I guess that went over pretty well. We also removed the XDR dependency. XDR is a very old library used for I/O, and it's so lightly used that it's been removed from glibc. So that dependency is gone. It's still kind of there. It's tucked inside. You don't see it. I ripped out almost all the guts and just left a few of the tiny vestiges of it. And then there's a couple of bug fixes in that. So the next release will be 4.4.0. It's another major release, and the reason for this is because I have to change the library versioning. So when we implemented CMake in HDF4, the name was different than the AutoTools name. So I'm going to fix this by picking the name that I think is better, which is the CMake name. And then Fortran will be in a separate library in the AutoTools when I fix this, because I have to fix some other stuff with the AutoTools. And that's going to have to happen. So if you're building with CMake, you probably won't see any changes. If you're building with the AutoTools, you'll probably have to change what you link against for Fortran and C. But the point of this is to make the build system look like HDF5, making it easier to maintain. So whenever there's a new compiler that comes out, we can just move the build files down from HDF5 into HDF4, rename a few things, and we should be done. And we can then support HDF4 for another 30 years with a minimal amount of effort, and that's what I'm hoping for with this. Now, if you remember, like a long time ago, if you've been coming to the user groups for a while, back in the 4.2 thing here, 4.2.16, this is when we took away all the hard-coded machine dependencies, right? And so now this uses configure options to self-configure, and that fixed a lot of the machine stuff, and now this is kind of fixing the compiler issues and stuff. And so I'm hoping that when we get to 4.4, that's just going to continue on for a long time and not cause people a lot of pain. So HDFU, we really haven't been making a lot of changes to HDFU, and I feel that's kind of unfortunate. People kind of do like to use HDFU to look around. I think it's still our most popular downloaded thing from the website. Current version is 3.3.2. It uses 114.4 and HDF4 3.0. We'll have another version next year that'll use 116.0 and 4.4.0. So I guess that's probably going to be 3.4.0, not 3.3.3. And one of the things I would like to get implemented in this, if I can find the resources to do so, is to enable paging so large files can be loaded and navigated. Right now, HDFU will try to open the whole file, and so if you have a big file, that's going to make your computer sad. So I would like to fix that. I don't think that's a difficult problem to fix. And we no longer maintain versions based on older versions of the library, 110, 112, things like that. It's only the current versions of HDF5 and HDF4. So, and about our release version. So we're trying to minimize the number of versions that we support. The release schedule is posted on GitHub. You can see what's coming up. I list features that I think are important that we're working on. These figures right here, like these plots, those are all in GitHub, so you can see them. We release HDF4 one time a year in the spring. We release HDF5 twice a year, spring and fall, and HDF View one time a year after HDF4 comes out. And we're trying to automate as much as possible. It's all on GitHub now. We're not quite at the point where we can do a one-click release, but we're getting there. A lot is automated now. Engagement. So one of the things we have going on is the HDF5 working group meeting. The purpose of that is to discuss HDF5 library development. So if you're down in the weeds, if you're writing a VFD or a Vol connector or working on something in the library, you want to be a library developer, or you just want to see the sausage be made, that's a meeting you can come to. It's open to anyone. There's the Zoom link on there. I announced the schedule on the forum and in the wiki on GitHub. There's a link down below. We go over PRs. We go over RFCs, other kinds of technical discussion. It's not for support. If you want support, that's for the forum. Email the help desk, things like that. It's Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Time. Now, we're not a Zoom shop, we're a team shop, and so there's been some problems with trying to communicate when the meeting is canceled because we don't always have it. If there's no agenda, I'm not going to have a meeting and just have people stare at each other. So I'll figure that out when I get back from Portugal, and we'll get that set up so that it's easier to communicate with you guys about that. So then there's the HDF5 plugin working group meeting. We talked about this in the last HDF user group meetings. We finally implemented it. And the purpose of that is to discuss plugin maintenance and deployment. So there's a lot of compression plugins out there, and people are sometimes afraid to use them because they don't want to create data files that can't easily be read elsewhere. And we do distribute many of the plugins that are in this repository that we've linked on here, but we want to make this more official. And to be more deliberate about the care and maintenance of some of these. So basically what we're going to do is we're declare a subset of these filters that are out there to be kind of like blessed filters, and those will be ones that will be maintained by a combination of the community and the HDF group and will be deployed with the library. And those are going to be the things that you should feel safe using. And then there'll be a bunch of other filters that we're going to try to gather up as much information as we can about them. They're not going to be the sorts of things that we support or try to create binaries for or anything like that. But if somebody does trip across a plugin, a filter ID that in the wild, you would be able to come to this repository and get a clue about who did it and where is the code and what kind of library is it and things like that. So this is replaces one of the HDF5 working group meetings. I hope that's not too inconvenient for Europeans. If it is, we may move to a different time. It's kind of hard. I'm in California, so it's quite a time difference between California and like France. So the August meeting will be a little late because I'm on vacation. So that'll be the third Thursday, it'll be August 15th. And it's open to anyone, same Zoom link. The wiki that we use is the one in the HDF5 plugins. And again, I announced on the forum if it's going to be canceled and things like that. And the same thing there, we're going to try to be better and get a calendar invite set up so that's easier to communicate with people about when that meeting happens and what's going on. So one of the other things that I'm excited about is, so we're going to borrow Python's Python enhancement proposal infrastructure and use that to create an HDF5 enhancement proposal infrastructure. And so if you've ever seen this, they use it for all kinds of stuff. They use it for kind of governance of Python. They use it for changes to the language. It's used for quite a few things. And will we use everything from it? Probably not. We'll see. Right now, there's a repository that Python uses a Python/peps repo to store all their stuff. We will do similar. We'll have HDF Group heps. Right now, that's empty. The heps infrastructure only exists on my laptop. But we'll get that pushed out there sometime. I think it's September. HEP1 will be like PEP1, describe the process and kind of how we plan to use it. And we'll be seeking community feedback. So if you have opinions on this, once we start pushing some of this stuff out there, please let us know. But this will be for a lot of stuff. Like if you want to if we're going to be changing anything in the library, this would be your one-stop shopping for kind of the engineering decisions and kind of how that whole thing works. It won't replace the user guide. The user guide is really for users. This is more for kind of, how do we build HDF5 and adapt it and change it going forward. Another thing, I don't have a lot here because I don't have super firm plans right now, but one of the things that I would like to do is I would like to restart the technical advisory board. Contact me if you're interested in being a part of this. I'll probably start looking at this more. I have some conference stuff I have to do in September, so maybe like October. So I'll look to see about starting that back up. So future plans. So what do we got going on in the future? So talk a little bit about future of cloud optimized HDF5, machine learning optimized HDF5, some documentation improvements, and what's going on with HDF5 2.0. So cloud optimized HDF5. So there's a lot of interest in this. NASA, a couple big projects like NISAR and ISAT2 are going to be creating cloud optimized HDF5 files. So I want to make sure that the cloud optimized HDF5 is easy to use and well integrated in the library. So I want the read-only S3 VFD to be a first-class citizen. I want it to be built more with the library and not to be this add-on thing that just doesn't always get built. I want it to have more extensive testing, more performance tuning. We may be able to put selection IO into it and get some performance gains there. I would also like to expand it into other cloud object stores. That's multi-cloud, so Azure and GCP, and just continue tweaks and enhancements. As Alexander has been working on this, he often comes to us with ideas for little things that we can change to make it work better for people, and we try to get those in as fast as we can into release. So it's a steady stream of cloud optimized HDF5 working better. And then one of the things that I think is really lacking is we have some very good videos that show you how to set up and use cloud optimized HDF5, but the user guide does not have any information on this. And so it's one of the things that we need to update. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So machine learning optimized HDF5. So since the cloud optimized HDF5 has been so successful, one of the things that I would like to start doing is to do this with machine learning as well. So look at the IO patterns, come up with best practices, documentation. Maybe there's some library tweaks or tools tweaks that we need to make this work better. But this is something that I want to start doing in the fall and continuing into 2025 is to really make a similar push in machine learning that we did in cloud. I think this would help a lot of people out. And also, combat. There's a lot of articles out there where somebody complains that HDF5 didn't work well for their machine learning workflow, and I'd like to have something that we can use as a rebuttal to that, and some success stories and some best practices to give to people. So another thing is documentation improvements. I know that our documentation is not always great. There's been a bunch of problems with the website recently, and we're trying to fix all that. And in the next year, this is one of the things that I would really like to spend some time addressing. And one of the things is the user guide has not gotten a lot of attention since probably about 1.12. So there's a lot of modern features that are not in the user guide. They exist in like white papers and videos and things like that. And we really need to consolidate that down and make the user guide a good, helpful document again. And that includes cloud optimized HDF5, which needs its own chapter in the user guide. And then another thing that we'd like to have is a migration guide for people who are updating versions. We're trying to encourage people to move to 1.14 and not stay stuck in 1.8 forever, especially we fixed most of the performance problems. So you don't have that excuse anymore. There's a lot of features there's features in the library, there's features when you build and configure that can help you move to newer versions of the library, but kind of still stay on your older file format or your older API. And so we want to document all of that. I think that would be a very helpful guide for people. And then best practices guide. I think a lot of people, when we get files from people, sometimes they have not the best usage of HDF5 for what they're trying to achieve. And so it would be nice to have a best practices guide that could be part of the user guide, some chapters at the end, maybe some call to doctors where we call out some of these things. I think that would be really helpful for people. And then HDF5 2.0. So if you look at the schedule or the release schedule on GitHub, I've added a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of it's a pretty big list of features. And so will all this get into HDF5 2.0? Probably not. But I do want to put out there what we're looking at and what we hope to get into the library. And that list will probably expand as we go forward over the next year or so. But right now, the most important thing that we have on there is multi-thread HDF5, which is work that is predominantly being done with Lifeboat LLC and NVIDIA. And so that will allow multiple threads inside the library. At least initially, it wouldn't be the whole library, probably. It would just be some subset of it, but it would allow certain critical API calls to basically be concurrent. And so I think that's probably it's the most frequently asked for feature by far. And so it'd be nice to have that even partially in the library. Sparse data storage and improved variable length data storage is a Lifeboat LLC project. They've been working on this. We have the crash proofing work that we have. So it's basically a write-ahead log. And related to that is Full Swimmer, so that we previously called DFT Swimmer. So that's something that I'd like to dust off and get that into the library. And then also encryption and digital signatures. I think that this is important for many people. So we'd like to work on that. We have some funds that we got from NSF to work on that. I think Lifeboat also is very interested in this. So there's a full list on GitHub. So and we'll keep that up to date. So quick shout out before I go. There's a No Bugs meeting in Grenoble, France. It's being organized by the ESRF and the Institut Langevin. I hope I didn't murder that. You can attend remotely. It's only 50 euros. Meeting website's there, and we'll be giving a talk on crash proofing. And that talk is on Tuesday, September 24th at 5 p.m. I think that's WEST. So that's probably like, if you're Central Time, I think that's like 10 in the morning. So it's pretty convenient time for the US. So yeah, and that's it. I'm hoping that I can dial in and answer questions, but if not, hopefully my designated representative can answer questions. And thanks for coming to the HUG, and I hope you're having a good time. And talk to you guys later. Bye.
No, I apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't bring my work laptop to Portugal, so I'm just here with the little Chromebook. Couldn't really give the presentation remotely.
Anything you did want to add? Just to review while you're watching yourself.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Is there anything you wanted to add while you were watching yourself present?
Yeah, I'm sorry I said so many times. I'll be better about that in the future. But no, it's an accurate picture of what I think we're going to be doing, what we've done in the past, and what we'll be doing in the future.
Cool. All right, so questions, comments from the audience, ideas, suggestions, guidance? We're doing community.
Yeah, so,
This is the
yep, we'll move on to that. We have a question in the audience for now.
Perhaps more fun instead of following up on Dana's mention, the plugin was saying that it already proved helpful, it's there, and I was helping it improve the internet one of the ways. However, we still had to dig pretty deep to find out the actual, well, kind of format beyond just the filter ID. So, I don't know if it's possible. Information, be the HDF5 wiki, or if you think that's too much detail.
file format.
Right.
Yeah. I believe he was saying that you can have progress this project, but the file format specification for how the filter plugins get included into the headers and other places in the trunk record and things like that.
The plugin that I was working with was putting its own header on the log that I had to put quite hard.
I think it's all that.
Of course. But maybe it can be documented in the wiki, filter ID.
And maybe we begin a new field at the table that said, and if you add a new thing at the beginning of every chunk for your filter, here's what that means for each filter author, and you could write that. Yeah, if you have the filter working group things,